Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be looking at this lapwing, and I'm going to show you and run through a few quick steps on how I created the feathers. So you can see you've got like an iridescent kind of feather kind of effect going on the wing. We're going to be looking at that, some of the dark feathers and those white feathers as well. So to start this one off, I am using a reference photo from one of my lovely subscribers, Carol Leather. Thank you, Carol, for letting us use this reference for this particular drawing, and if you want to use it as well and follow along in real time, then you can head over to Patreon or my website and subscribe, where you can draw this 4.5 hour tutorial in real time with me. The outline for this guy was made using the grid method and a little bit of freehand for this one. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for exactly how I use the grid method to get my accurate outlines, so you can create your accurate outlines as well. So the link for that will be in the description below. Now for this particular tutorial, I'm not going to focus too much on any of the other aspects of the bird, so the eye, the beak, the feet, or any of that kind of stuff. We're just going to talk about the feathers on this one, because I get a lot of questions about how to create dark feathers and how to create white feathers, and also how to create bright coloured feathers. I've previously, a couple of weeks ago now, drawn a galah and used pink colours to create feathers for that, and I've got a whole video on how I use those pink colours and how I use some other colours for shading to create some really natural looking shadows, so I'm going to leave the link for that in the description below for you guys as well. So we're kind of carrying on that kind of feather technique and the feather explanation with this guy here. So the whiter, kind of lighter feathers around the eyes, I've actually started off by using a warm grey one as a base. So for these particular feathers, they're quite kind of soft, almost fur looking. So to begin with, what I've done is taken my warm grey one pencil, the lightest colour that I'm going to use for the base, and I have shaded in the direction that the feathers are going. And around an area like an eye and on the head here, there are several different directions which you kind of have to pay attention to. So around the eye, the feathers kind of spiral around like it would with fur, and also where the beak is attached to the head as well. You need to be careful of the feather direction around that particular area. On top of that base of the warm grey one, I have layered in some Beaster and some Nougat, and also some warm grey 3 as well, just to build the kind of darker shadows within there. And this particular bird has a really kind of dark, kind of like a boomerang shape underneath the eye here, and to add in that dark colour, I've just added in some walnut brown on top of my base of warm grey, and also layered in some cold grey 5 and some dark indigo as well, to create a really nice dark tone, but without going in and using like pure black or dark sepia. To darken up a few areas, I have also added in a little bit of dark sepia there as well. So the lighter feathers on this particular type of bird are just created by adding in some browns and some greys and a little bit of blue here and there as well. Adding in a little bit of blue to any kind of white texture will just make it appear a little bit brighter compared to, especially when it's next to darker areas as well. So this particular white area is next to this dark head section where we've got all of these like kind of fascinator type feathers on the head, and by adding in a little bit of blue, it just makes those warm grey 1 tones that I've added down as a base for the feathers appear a lot more whiter. The feathers on the head of the lapwing here are kind of slick and slippery looking, kind of like an oil spill. It's kind of the same effect as we've got going down through the wing. But on the head here, I just laid down again a nice base of the warm grey one, following the direction of the feathers. And then I actually added in some purple violet tones and also some dark indigo, so some blue and purple underneath there. And those colours are going to act as my highlight areas, and that's what's going to help it look really nice and shiny, and also give depth to the surrounding darker areas where I'm going to add some dark sepia. So once I've added in those blues and purples over the top of the warm grey, I've then gone in with some dark indigo, walnut brown and dark sepia, and just added in the darker areas on the feathers there, and left those areas of purple and blue a lot lighter, blended out with a little bit of a white pencil to make it really nice and smooth and slick as well. So we're continuing some of the darker feathers around the neck of the bird with exactly the same technique. So I've gone in with a light base and then added in some purple and some dark indigo blue tones, and you can see I'm just kind of darkening up the feathers and blending it with the white to make them look really nice and smooth and slick. So again, we've got the same sort of thing here. We're just leaving the purple and the blue to speak as the highlights, and to dilute the purple and the blue I've just used a really light hand when I'm initially adding that down, and then using the white coloured pencil to kind of lighten it and give it a kind of pastel-y effect. And then if I needed to go darker, I could always add in another light layer of blue or purple back over the top, but for the lighter areas just one layer and then blend it out with the white is enough for this particular bird. The technique for these darker feathers and these lighter feathers that I'm now adding on the breast and the chest of the bird remains the same as what we did around the face, but instead of having like a little bit more of a fur kind of look where you're adding a few more lines in a few more sort of defined areas, everything is looking fairly smooth and everything is really nice and blended out. So I'm using a lot more of that white pencil to try and eliminate any grain of the paper showing through and also eliminate any kind of harsh pencil lines. So everything looks really nice and smooth, nice and blended and nice and slick, and we're not adding in any kind of really dark individual lines depicted on these particular feathers here. We're just keeping everything nice and smooth and blended. And on this particular white area I've added in a lot more blue, and I've also added in a lot more pink as well on the underside. I've added in those pink tones because they are a really nice complementing colour to the blue and the purple that I've added in the darker feathers. So adding in that pink is just going to help to bring a really nice cohesive colour scheme to the bird, and also adding in lots of different colours into white feathers, white fur and white textures makes it appear a lot brighter. Like I said, with the adding in the blue tones, it makes it appear a lot more whiter, but with the pink ones here, it's just adding in a really nice shadow colour that isn't going to muddy. So adding in too many browns and too many greys often ends up muddying your white areas and makes them appear really dull. But if you're adding in some unusual colours like pink or maybe a little bit of orange, I also added in a little bit of burnt ochre into the white feathers here, it's just going to give some more natural looking shadows. So now for the trickier part of this particular bird, and probably the reason why you're watching this tutorial, because you want to know how to create these types of feathers yourself. So the oil slick type feathers on the wings. First thing that I've done here is added in the darker areas of the particular section I'm working on. So I've used my dark indigo pencil and I've mixed it with a little bit of walnut brown and dark sepia, and I've added in the darker shadows between each of the individual feather sections first. And that's just going to help me to define each individual little feather bit and where some feathers are sitting on top of others. It's just going to help me with the structure of the feathers at this point. Now if you're wanting some really nice bright iridescent feathers, you're not going to want to add down a base of grey. So eliminate the base layer of the warm grey and just go straight in with your colours that you're going to be needing. In this case, in the slightly darker feathers, it was blue and green, and I started off with an earth green base and added in some helio turquoise and some purple violet, and working my way up to dark indigo. So there's no really light base of warm grey present on these feathers at all. So by eliminating that, you're going to keep those colours really nice and bright. They're going to really pack a punch in comparison to your more neutral colours surrounding them. If you were to add in a base of grey, you tend to find that it kind of dulls those colours down a lot more and you're not going to get them as bright. You're still going to get some of those individual tones, but they're just not going to be as bright and as punchy. So if you want to keep it really nice and vibrant and alive, then eliminate the base of the warm grey and just go straight in with your lighter colours. So using some lighter greens or blues first for any blue colours of feathers, and then if you've got pink tones, then you can add in something like a rose carmine or your purple violet. Just make sure you use a really light hand and always make sure that you're working in the direction of the feather as well. So working with that light hand and in the direction of the feather is just going to ensure the structure of the feather as well as determining that base colour of that feather as well. Once you've got a few of the colours down as a light base, then you can go ahead and blend with the white pencil if your feathers are particularly slick, which they tend to be if you have this kind of effect going on a feather. So use a white pencil or whatever blending method is preferable to you. So use some solvent if you want to, just make sure you've got enough light layers down in order to blend to get rid of the grain of the paper. And then you want to resaturate your colours by using some of your sort of mid-tones of those, so going in with some more earth green or helio turquoise if you're working on blue feathers. If you don't have any mid-tones and those are the colours that you used for your base, then you can just go in with a little bit of a heavier pressure to really get that colour down onto that tooth of the paper. So what you're working with in these particular type of feathers, you're adding in those really dark tones first to define all of the individual feathers. Then you're going back to your lighter tones and working your way up to your mid-tones with your lighter colours, or some mid-tone colours if you have them in your palette. If you're using a limited palette like I was here, then what I did was just use those mid-tones, use that lighter pressure and the white to dilute them a little bit to create the sort of highlight area in the feather. Then I worked a little bit of a harder pressure in the darker areas of the feathers, so underneath where they overlap and right next to where you've got those darker elements that you add in first. So to create the shadow on your iridescent type feathers like this, the one thing you're going to want to do is use a complementing colour to increase the darkness of the area. So the complementing colour of a lot of these feathers here was the dark indigo. It worked well with the blue and the purple, so the helio turquoise and the purple violet that I used, but also worked really well with the greens that I chose, so the earth green. I also chose a juniper green for this. And it paired well with the pinks as well because it's on a similar kind of tone scale or complementary colour scale as the pinks. So I used the dark indigo pencil for a lot of my shadowing here and creating natural looking shadows. And I've also paired the dark indigo with the purple violet as well. And I did increase the darkness in a few areas with a little bit of dark sepia, but that was just here and there. So just to recap for those feathers, you want to make sure that you add in your darker areas first, then you want to work your lighter tones and work up to your mid-tones, and then blend your mid-tones into those shadow areas. And in those shadow areas you want to make sure that you are using complementary colours and not trying to use too many colours that are going to muddy, so stay away from greys and browns and try and stick to your sort of colour palette and those harmonious colours within that palette. Mainly go for blue if you're working on a similar type of bird like me here and you've got a lot of blue, green and purple tones in the bird. So just another quick note on the whiter feathers. Remember to add in your shadows within the whiter feathers, but in those shadows make sure that you include a lot of different colours that aren't just browns and greys. You need to add in some of the colours that are going on within the other feathers on the bird as well. So in this case I had a whole rainbow of colours that I could have added into the white feathers on the breast and the underside of the bird, but I chose to stick to blues, purples and pinks because those work really nicely together to create some nice shadows, and it also reflected the colours within the rest of the feathers here as well. When you're creating your feathers as well, make sure to look at the texture of them. So as you can see on my lapwing here, I've got two different types of textures. I've got the really kind of fluffy feathers going on in the white areas of the bird, and the darker sections of the bird are more slick and you've got less detail going on. So in the whiter areas I've used a lot more kind of defined lines to try and get some of the darker shadows creeping in a little bit more, and in the darker feather areas I've used a lot more of the white pencil to try and help blend and smooth everything out so that you're eliminating that grain of the paper and getting that really nice smooth shiny surface of the feather. So that is pretty much it for this short tutorial on this lapwing. I hope that you have discovered a few techniques and a few tips here and there that will help you if you're creating your own feathered friends. Let me know in the comments down below if you want me to go into depth on any particular thing that I have mentioned in this video, and I will work on getting a new video out for you guys. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!